Recently, you have probably heard me talking quite a bit about history, quite a bit about the lost nation of Tartaria, a nation that existed in Europe that nobody seems to know about. It's a nation that's been expunged from history, and yet it still exists on many maps. Well, it still exists on many old maps anyway. It doesn't exist on too many new maps, but you can still find it on old maps if you search for it, and it does appear to be quite a well-known and well-established nation. Of course, any academic sources that you question about this nation, they will simply tell you it was an area of land, it was never actually a nation, and yet, as I've also pointed out previously, we can find flags of this nation. And if it was just an area and not a nation, then it wouldn't have a flag. So it was in fact a nation and not simply an area of land, and there's every indication that it had also spread out to become a worldwide civilization. This is very much suggested by the similar architecture in so many countries around the world, very old architecture, which is all very much the same. And this is what is termed Greco-Roman architecture. But one would ask, why would every country around the world be building their government buildings using the same architecture? You find this everywhere. You find it all through the Americas, you find it through South America, you find it even in Japan and Australia. So why would they be using the same style? That's the question. And even not just the architecture, but the symbolism, the motifs, the designs, even the clothing, the styles of clothing that people wear, these are all very similar all around the world. They may not seem that way when you first look at them on the surface, but when you really analyse things, you find that they all have a common root, which very much suggests that all of these nations, all of these cultures were all connected. And no matter how you look at it, this is very much what is indicated, ladies and gentlemen, and also through the discovery of a worldwide language, which was Magyar, or the root language of Hungarian, which was spoken by the Incas, by the Polynesians, and also by all the Australian Aboriginals, and many cultures all around the world seem to have spoken this language. Polynesians, Melanesians, all of the island cultures seem to have spoken it. In fact, Magyar seems to have been so common around the world that one might question if one were to apply Magyar translations to some of the lost languages that we still can't figure out, such as the Rondo and things like this. Perhaps we could find that there is a way of translating them if we use Magyar. Who knows? It's just a thought. And something else you've heard me talking about a great deal is the evidence suggesting a worldwide mud flood that happened as recently as 150 to 200 years ago. As I've mentioned before, there's a Russian channel run by a man called Philip Druzinin who is covering this quite extensively, and I do recommend you go and look at the research that he's done on this, because it is quite compelling. And you'll find that there is evidence of this mud flood that exists everywhere. I mean, it did happen, folks, and it was a physical flood, but it was not water, and it was an event that covered virtually the entire world. You can find evidence of this flood across Europe, across the Americas, even here in Australia. And evidence of this flood appears as buildings that have a sub-level, a level below ground, and also as many of the buildings that look like they were carved into rock faces, look like they were carved into cliffs. There's a very real possibility that they weren't carved into the cliffs, but simply the cliffs flowed over them, or perhaps the cliffs even became molten around them. But however it happened and however it manifested, suffice to say there is a good deal of evidence to indicate that the mud flood is a very, very genuine event, and it's very likely that it occurred in the mid to late 1840s. And there's a lot of people who've been putting a lot of research into this, and a lot of information is being uncovered about what has truly happened in the past. And our history appears to be very, very different to what the mainstream has taught us, to what we've learned in academic institutions, what we learned in schools. In fact, none of what we are taught in schools of what our history is backed up by physical evidence. All the physical evidence says something quite different. And there may be some people that would debate that. They'd say, well, no, we've got a lot of physical evidence to support the official timeline, but really, when you look at the physical evidence, you can construct any story you want to make it sort of fit with the evidence, but you have to leave a great deal of it out, which is why there's so many great mysteries and anomalous objects and all the names they think up for all the things they can't explain. You know, and ultimately, folks, if there's one artifact that is out of place, then the official version is wrong. And there are literally hundreds of artifacts that are out of place, if the official version is to be believed at all. And again, these are all sort of listed as anomalous objects and great mysteries and all shrouded in secrecy and presented as something that we just don't know how they did it. But really, if you can face the very real possibility that they don't fit because the timeline and the history that we're given is completely wrong, then you begin to see a little bit of the bigger picture. And it is wrong, folks. Our history is wrong. I have no qualms in saying that. It's completely wrong. Most of it has been completely fabricated, and I would suggest that it's been done absolutely deliberately for a very specific reason. The question is, how did they do it? How did they erase history so effectively? And what really happened?